It was one of those London mornings, gray, wet, and unapologetically ordinary. The kind of day where the rain feels endless, where umbrellas collide on the pavement, and where everyone walks too fast for eye contact. Amelia Wright, 27, florist and habitual overthinker, was already late. Her van had refused to start, the florist delivery was due by 9, and her favorite raincoat had mysteriously disappeared overnight. Now she was balancing a bouquet box in one hand, her phone wedged between her ear and shoulder, and a takeaway coffee clutched precariously in the other. "Margaret, I promise I'm nearly there," she said breathlessly into the phone, dodging a puddle that looked more like a small lake. "The roses are perfect, you'll love." And then it happened. She turned the corner too quickly, colliding with someone tall and solid, the kind of collision that sends a shock through your whole body. Her coffee arced through the air like a slow-motion scene in a film and landed squarely on the stranger's crisp white shirt. "Oh my God," she gasped, freezing in horror. The man blinked down at the spreading brown stain on his chest, then looked up, rain dripping from his hair, a mixture of surprise and amusement flickering across his face. "Well," he said, half laughing, "that's one way to start a conversation." Amelia's cheeks burned. "I am so sorry. I swear I'm not usually this clumsy," he offered. "Exactly. That? I'll pay for your shirt. Or at least buy you another coffee." He smiled then, properly this time, the kind of smile that disarms you, soft and real. "No harm done. I was running late anyway. Maybe the universe just wanted to slow me down." For a moment, they both stood there in the drizzle, the city blurring around them, buses hissing by, umbrellas bobbing like dark flowers. He looked familiar somehow, though she couldn't place him. Maybe it was just the calm in his eyes, or the way he didn't seem rushed by the chaos. "I'm really sorry," she said again, fumbling for tissues that weren't there. He shook his head, amused. "It's fine, honestly. Coffee washes out. Mostly." Before she could say more, a van horn blared from down the street, her delivery driver, waving impatiently. Amelia's panic returned. I have to go. I'm so sorry again." She turned to leave, her heart still thudding, but then his voice stopped her. "Wait. You forgot your coffee." She looked down at her empty hands, then at the ruined cup still in his. They both laughed. "I think that one's yours now," she said, backing away. He grinned. "Then maybe fate owes us another round." She smiled, a small, nervous one, and hurried off through the rain, bouquet box bouncing against her hip, cheeks still warm. Back in the van, she replayed the moment in her mind. The way he'd laughed instead of scowled. The calm tone in his voice, soft but confident. The way London's noise had faded for just a second. She tried to shake it off. He was just a stranger. A very good-looking stranger. But still a stranger. Across the street, Ethan Cole, 30, architect, always early, rarely distracted, watched her vanish into the traffic. He glanced down at his ruined shirt and laughed quietly to himself. Something about her, the way she spoke too quickly, the awkward charm, stayed with him longer than he expected. He checked his watch, sighed, and muttered, "Worth it." He walked into the cafe she'd stormed past, still smiling, unaware that this would be the first of 10 mornings that would change everything. That night, as the rain pressed softly against her flat window, Amelia found herself staring at the ceiling, replaying a single sentence in her head. "Maybe the universe just wanted to slow me down." She smiled to herself, not knowing that somewhere else in London, Ethan was thinking the same thing. 2 strangers. 1 city. And a coffee spill that had just rewritten their stories, though neither of them knew it yet. A week later, London was in one of its rare good moods, blue skies, sunlight catching on glass towers, people walking a little slower just to feel it. Amelia had the morning off, and for the first time in days, she wasn't rushing anywhere. She decided to treat herself to her favorite cafe, the one on the corner of Camden Street, with ivy on the windows and the smell of fresh bread drifting into the air. She pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming softly. Inside, jazz played quietly, the kind that made time feel slower. She ordered her usual, a flat white and a croissant, and found a seat by the window. The table was warm from the sunlight, and for once, she allowed herself to just breathe. No deliveries. No deadlines. Just the hum of the city outside and the soft crackle of coffee cups meeting saucers. As she scrolled aimlessly through her phone, the bell above the door chimed again. She didn't look up, not until she heard a familiar voice. "Please tell me you've got spare napkins, I'm having flashbacks." She froze. That voice. She looked up, and there he was, the man with the ruined white shirt, the calm eyes, and that same crooked half-smile. Ethan. This time, in a navy jumper, sleeves rolled to his forearms, coffee already in hand. Amelia blinked, half laughing. You're kidding. I was going to say the same thing. He gestured toward the empty chair across from her. Mind if I sit? I promise I left the coffee disasters outside. She nodded, smiling despite herself. All right. But if you spill anything this time, I'm invoicing you. He sat down, grinning. Deal. They talked. It started with jokes, the coffee stain, London weather, how both of them seemed cursed with bad timing. But slowly, it drifted somewhere deeper. He told her about his work, designing community spaces, trying to make buildings feel like they belonged to the people who used them. She told him about her flower shop, how she loved the quiet mornings before opening, when the whole place smelled like roses and possibility. He listened, really listened, in a way that made her forget her usual nervousness. He had that rare kind of attention that made the world feel smaller, safer. Between laughter and small silences, something gentle started to build, not dramatic or overwhelming, but warm. Familiar. At one point, she caught herself tracing circles on her coffee cup, nervous energy betraying her calm tone. You know, she said, I almost didn't come here today. I usually avoid this side of the city after the whole shirt incident. He laughed. Then maybe this is the universe's apology. She smiled. You and your universe. Well, it's been working so far, he said. It got us here again, didn't it? They talked for nearly 2 hours, long enough for her coffee to go cold, long enough that the sunlight began to fade behind the buildings. When she finally looked at the time, she gasped. Oh no, I was meant to meet a supplier an hour ago. He grinned. You can blame me. I'm good at being a distraction. As she gathered her things, he stood too. Can I at least walk you out? Outside, the air had turned crisp. The city buzzed with end-of-day noise, cars, chatter, the sound of someone busking a slow guitar melody down the street. At the corner, she turned to him. Well, this was nice. It was, he said. And next time, I'll buy the coffee. You've done your part. Next time, she teased. He hesitated for just a heartbeat. If the universe is still feeling generous. She laughed, stepping back toward the crossing. Then maybe it will surprise us again. He watched her walk away, her hair catching the late sunlight, the sound of her laughter fading into the crowd. Something inside him whispered that this wasn't coincidence. And as he walked in the opposite direction, a small voice in her heart agreed. 2 paths. 2 strangers who were no longer strangers. And somewhere, hidden in the noise of London, the universe smiled, because it knew this was only the beginning. London had one of those rare evenings that almost didn't feel real, soft golden lights spilling across the streets, the smell of rain still clinging to the air from earlier, and the city moving just slow enough for people to notice it. Amelia stepped out of the shop, locking the door behind her, the last customer's laughter still echoing in her mind. Her day had been long but good, and she couldn't help smiling when she saw a familiar figure leaning against a lamppost across the street. Ethan. He wasn't looking at his phone or checking the time. He was just waiting, watching the sky shift from gold to amber. When he saw her, his face lit up with that quiet, effortless smile of his, the kind that made her forget how to breathe for a second. I was in the area, he said, as she crossed the street. Were you? She teased. Or is this another one of your universe moments? He laughed. Maybe both. I thought I'd walk you home. If that's all right? Something about his tone, polite, warm, just a little nervous, made her heart skip. Sure, she said. But I'm warning you, it's not a short walk. Good, he replied. I could use a long one. They started down the street, their steps naturally finding the same rhythm. The city was alive around them, the hum of buses, the faint buzz of a guitarist playing near the river, the smell of curry from a food stall drifting through the air. It was ordinary, and yet, it wasn't. She told him about the chaos of running a flower shop, about how Valentine's Day nearly broke her soul, how tulips were secretly temperamental, and how she sometimes talked to her plants when the shop was empty. He laughed so hard he nearly tripped. Please tell me they answer back. Only the orchids, she said with a perfectly straight face. He grinned. I knew it. That explains everything. Then he told her about his work, the designs he was working on, how hard it was to make buildings that felt alive. I don't want to just make things that stand, he said. I want to make spaces people remember. That's kind of beautiful, she said softly. You build places where life happens. He glanced at her, thoughtful. And you fill the world with color. We make a pretty good team." That simple line made her blush, though she hid it with a quick smile. As they reached the Thames, the evening light deepened, the water glimmering with city reflections. They stopped by the railing, watching boats drift by. For a few moments, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it felt full, heavy with something neither wanted to disturb. Amelia glanced sideways at him. He was looking out at the river, hands in his pockets, hair a little messy from the breeze. She wondered what he was thinking. Maybe about work, or maybe, hopefully, about her. He caught her looking and smiled. "What?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Just wondering if you ever stop thinking about buildings." "Only when I'm thinking about other things," he said softly. "Like what?" He met her eyes, the air between them suddenly smaller, charged. "Like people who make me smile when I don't mean to." She didn't know what to say. The words landed somewhere deep, stealing her breath for a second. They walked on, slower now, both quietly aware of something new forming between them, something fragile but undeniable. When they reached her street, she stopped by the corner. "Well," she said, smiling nervously, "this is me." "Guess the walk wasn't long enough," he said, half joking. "Next time, take the long route," she said. "Next time," he repeated softly. "Good night, Amelia." "Good night, Ethan." She stood there for a moment after he walked away, watching his figure fade into the city lights. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the flowers she'd left by the door. She couldn't stop smiling. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, not yet love, but something close. Something beginning. Ethan walked home with the same quiet smile, the rhythm of their steps still echoing in his mind. He didn't know what this was yet. But for the first time in a long time, London didn't feel lonely. Two hearts. One city. And a slow walk that had quietly changed everything. It started as a joke. Amelia had mentioned over coffee one morning that she hadn't left London in months. Ethan had smiled, saying she needed a change of scenery, and before either of them could overthink it, she'd said, "Fine. Plan something." She hadn't actually expected him to. But 3 days later, her phone buzzed with a message that simply read, "Pack a bag. I'll pick you up Saturday. Don't worry, no coffee disasters this time." Now, standing at the station with her overnight bag and an anxious smile, Amelia wondered what exactly she'd agreed to. The platform smelled faintly of rain, and trains came and went in a blur of motion. Then she saw him, messy hair, scarf around his neck, that easy grin that made everything else fade. "You actually came," he said. "You actually planned something," she teased. "Color me impressed." He handed her a coffee, securely lidded this time, and they boarded the train. As London slipped away through the window, replaced by open fields and small villages, something shifted between them. The noise of the city faded, leaving space for quieter things, laughter, conversation, long silences that felt natural. He told her they were going to Bath. "Hot springs, old streets, and way too many tea shops," he said. "Sounds perfect," she replied, and meant it. The train rocked gently as they talked. Sometimes, they didn't talk at all. She watched the countryside roll by, the late afternoon sun turning everything gold, and thought that if time could pause anywhere, this might be the moment she'd choose. Bath was everything she'd needed without realizing it: cobbled streets, soft hills, the smell of bread and rain. They wandered aimlessly, stopping at bookshops and small cafes, laughing at street performers and badly drawn caricatures. At one point, Ethan spotted a flower stall by the river. He picked up a small bunch of daisies and handed them to her. "For your shop," he said. She smiled. "For my heart, more like." He laughed, but his eyes softened, and for a brief second, the air between them felt different, heavier, sweeter. That evening, they found a little restaurant tucked between two old buildings. Candlelight, slow music, the smell of rosemary and wine. "Do you do this often?" she asked, teasing again. "Spontaneous weekend trips with flower shop owners?" "Not really," he said. "Pity," she replied, her tone light but her heart fluttering. He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. It wasn't dramatic. No fireworks, no music swelling in the background. Just two people sitting across a small table, realizing that something had quietly, beautifully changed. When they stepped outside after dinner, the streets were quiet, the stones glistening from a light drizzle. He offered his hand, half as a joke. "Careful," he said. "Wouldn't want to trip and make it a tradition." She laughed, but her hand slid into his, warm and steady. Neither of them let go. They walked along the river, hand in hand, the city lights reflected in the water. She could hear the faint hum of a violin from somewhere nearby, the world feeling impossibly gentle. "You know," he said softly, "this feels easy." "What does?" "Us. This. Like it's always been supposed to happen." She squeezed his hand, her voice quiet. "Maybe it always was." He smiled, and for a moment, it was as if the rest of the world disappeared, just the sound of water, the rhythm of their steps, and the pulse of something neither of them dared name. Later that night, as they walked back to the small inn where they were staying, Amelia felt a strange peace. The kind that comes when you stop running from fear, from loneliness, from yourself. When she lay in bed later, listening to the rain outside her window, she thought of Ethan's laugh, the warmth of his hand, the way he looked at her across the table. And she knew, deep down, that this was no longer just a coincidence. This was the beginning of something real. The weekend in Bath felt like a dream Amelia didn't want to wake from, a perfect blur of laughter, long walks, and quiet moments that felt bigger than they looked. But dreams always fade, and by Monday morning, London's chill and noise had returned, wrapping her back into its rhythm. Yet, something lingered. Every time she opened her shop, she caught herself smiling at nothing. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt. Ethan texted her often simple things, photos of half-built models from his work, snapshots of the sky, jokes that made her laugh at inconvenient moments. It felt easy, natural, as if he'd quietly found his way into the corners of her life. One slow afternoon, between deliveries and tea breaks, Amelia decided to print out a few photos from their trip. She'd taken dozens: the river, the bookshop, the candlelit restaurant. She wanted to pin one to the wall of her office, a reminder that sometimes life surprised you in the kindest ways. She plugged her phone into the shop computer and began scrolling through the pictures. And that's when she noticed it. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. Just a small, barely noticeable detail, the reflection in one of the photographs. It was from their walk along the river, the one where Ethan had handed her the daisies. In the picture, she was smiling at him, her hair tangled in the wind. But in the shop window behind them, faintly reflected, stood a figure. A man, tall, dark coat, standing still, watching. She frowned, zooming in. The figure's face was obscured, but the outline was sharp. He wasn't moving, wasn't blurred by motion, as if he'd been standing there a while. She felt a strange, cold ripple down her spine. She scrolled through the rest of the photos, the park, the restaurant, the old bridge. And then she froze. In another shot, barely visible at the edge of the frame, the same man. Standing near the river. Always just far enough to seem like background. Amelia sat back, her stomach twisting. She told herself it was nothing. Just coincidence. Tourists, strangers, Bath was full of people after all. Still, the thought lingered. When Ethan came by that evening, carrying his usual grin and 2 cups of coffee, she almost didn't mention it. But he noticed her distracted expression instantly. "You okay?" he asked, placing the cups down. She hesitated. "Yeah, just tired." "Liar." He smiled gently. "You look like you've seen a ghost." She hesitated again, then turned her phone toward him. "It's probably nothing, but look at this." He leaned closer. For a moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise, maybe even recognition, but it was gone so quickly she couldn't be sure. "Huh," he said calmly. "Weird angle. Probably just someone walking by." "Yeah," she said slowly. "That's what I thought." But her instincts didn't believe it. They spent the rest of the evening pretending nothing had changed, sipping coffee, talking about weekend plans, the same warmth between them. But something in her chest felt heavier now, a small knot of unease that refused to untangle. When Ethan left that night, he kissed her cheek, soft, lingering, and said, "Don't overthink the photo, okay? The world's full of strangers." But as she watched him walk away, a quiet thought crept into her mind. What if the stranger wasn't the one in the photograph? Later that night, she couldn't sleep. She got up, turned on the light, and looked again at the pictures. Every detail felt different now. The shadows, the faces, the reflections. And there, in one final image she hadn't noticed before, a group shot taken by a passerby near the bridge, she saw it again. The same man. Same coat. Standing behind Ethan. She turned off her phone, her heart pounding. Maybe it was just her imagination. Maybe it was nothing. But somewhere deep inside, she felt the faint stir of something she couldn't explain: fear, curiosity, and the unsettling feeling that Ethan wasn't telling her everything. And the worst part? She wasn't sure she wanted to know the truth. The city had gone quiet hours ago. Only the faint hum of traffic rolled through Amelia's open window and the rhythmic tap of rain against the glass. She lay awake, the kind of awake that comes not from caffeine but from questions. The photos were still on her desk. She had looked at them so many times that the shapes had almost lost meaning, except for that shadowy figure, the one who didn't belong. She had tried to convince herself it was nothing. But curiosity never slept. She finally reached for her phone, half tempted to text Ethan just to hear him tease her out of it. Before she could, the screen lit up. Unknown number. 0:17 a.m. Her breath caught. She hesitated, thumb hovering. The rain tapped faster. Then she answered. Hello. No response. Just static, soft, distant, like the sound of wind through wires. Who's this? She tried again. A pause. Then a man's voice, low and rough. Is this Amelia Price? Her chest tightened. Who's asking? The voice came slower this time, careful. You don't know me, but you should be careful who you trust. What? Click. The line went dead. She sat there for a long minute, staring at the phone as if it might explain itself. The number was blocked. No voicemail. Just silence and the rain. By morning she'd almost convinced herself she'd dreamed it. She even laughed at the absurdity while unlocking the shop door, telling herself she'd let a ghost story get under her skin. Then she saw the envelope. Plain white. No stamp. Slipped through the letterbox sometime before dawn. Her name scrawled in black ink. Inside was a single photograph, one she hadn't taken. It was of her and Ethan, sitting outside that cafe in Bath, smiling. But the angle was wrong, as if taken from across the street, through glass. And behind them, reflected in the window, that same dark-coated figure again. This time he was closer. Watching. Her hands shook. The back of the photo was blank except for one sentence, printed neatly in small type. Do you really know him? By the time Ethan arrived that evening, her nerves were frayed. He walked in carrying tulips, his grin as bright as ever. You okay? He asked, reading her face. She forced a smile. Didn't sleep much. He handed her the flowers. Insomnia? Or overthinking? Bit of both. They stood there in the shop surrounded by the smell of fresh blooms and rain-damp air. She wanted to tell him everything, the call, the envelope, the photo, but something in her hesitated. What if he already knew? Instead, she said softly, have you ever felt like someone's watching you? He paused, eyes flicking toward hers. Only when you're looking at me like that, he said lightly. But the laugh didn't quite reach his eyes. Later, after he'd gone, Amelia sat in the dark shop, phone in her hand, heart beating too fast. She looked again at the photograph. Then she opened her browser and typed his name, Ethan Cole, architect, half hoping, half dreading what she might find. Projects, awards, a few articles. Everything seemed normal. But buried 3 pages deep in a local newspaper archive was a headline that made her blood run cold. Local architect involved in mysterious accident, partners still missing. She clicked. The article was short. A building site, a fall, conflicting witness accounts. No charges. And a name she didn't recognize, Daniel Hale, listed as the missing partner. The date? 2 years ago. She closed the laptop, her pulse hammering. Who had called her? Who was the man in the photos? And what exactly had Ethan been running from before he found her? Outside, thunder rolled over London. Somewhere in the distance, her phone buzzed with a new message. Ethan, can I see you tomorrow? Need to tell you something. She stared at the screen. The rain hadn't stopped all night. And for the first time since meeting him, she wasn't sure she wanted to know what he had to say. By the time the rain eased, dawn was only a pale bruise above the rooftops. Amelia hadn't slept. She'd spent the night pacing between the counter and the window, replaying that headline in her head until the words lost shape. When Ethan texted again, lunch? Please. She almost didn't answer. But curiosity and fear twisted together until she finally typed back. Come by the shop. He arrived just after noon. No smile this time, no flowers. His coat was still wet, his eyes shadowed. You look awful, she said quietly. I feel worse. They stood among the lilies and peonies, the air thick with scent and things unsaid. I need to tell you something, he began. And you probably won't want to see me again after. Amelia folded her arms, forcing her voice steady. Start talking. He ran a hand through his hair. The man in those photos. I know who he is. Or I used to. She waited. His name's Daniel Hale. We worked together. Partners in an architecture firm I started years ago. We were friends, good ones. He paused. Then there was the accident. He told her about the project, a renovation in Shoreditch, an old theater they were turning into apartments. There'd been safety complaints, budget cuts, arguments. One night he'd gone back to the site. Daniel was there. He was furious, Ethan said. He thought I'd cut corners. I hadn't, but I couldn't prove it. We shouted, I walked away. Then there was this crash. The scaffolding gave way. He swallowed hard. They said it was an accident. But I couldn't face the investigation. I blamed myself. I left the firm, moved across the city, changed everything. And Daniel? Amelia whispered. They never found him. Presumed dead. Her heart pounded. Then who's been following us? Who's in those pictures? He shook his head. I don't know. But the first time I saw that reflection, I thought my mind was playing tricks. Then he showed me the photo, and he broke off, voice cracking. I was terrified it was real. Silence filled the shop. Outside, a bus hissed past, the ordinary world carrying on. So you've been hiding, she said finally. Yes. And lying. I didn't know how to tell you without losing you. Her throat tightened. You think it's easier now? He looked at her, eyes raw. No. But you deserve the truth. She wanted to be angry, wanted to throw the photos in his face, but she saw the tremor in his hands, the guilt that hadn't left him for years. Ethan, she said slowly, if this Daniel's alive, you need to go to the police. I did once, he said softly. They had nothing. And whoever's watching us, maybe they want me to finish breaking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, the same kind that had been slipped through her door. This came to me last night, he said. No note. Just this. Inside was a single photograph, Amelia locking her shop, Ethan waiting across the street. The angle, the timing, it was taken yesterday. Something cold swept through her chest. Whoever he is, he's here now, she whispered. Ethan nodded. And I think he wants me to find him. He took her hands across the counter. I never meant to drag you into this. Meeting you is the first good thing that's happened in years. But if you're scared, if you want to walk away, I'll understand. She held his gaze, heart racing. Every rational thought told her to leave. But love rarely listens to reason. I'm not leaving, she said. Not until I know what's really happening. He exhaled, relief and fear tangled together. Then we find out together. Outside, the clouds gathered again, the sky darkening to slate. Inside the little flower shop, among the petals and perfume, two people stood facing something far larger than either of them had expected, still holding on, because neither could bear to let go. And somewhere in the distance, unseen, a camera shutter clicked once, quietly, as if marking the moment the story truly changed. The following evening, Shoreditch looked nothing like Amelia remembered. She'd been there years ago, the coffee shops, the painted walls, the chaos of color and noise. But tonight, it felt different. Colder. As if the city itself knew they shouldn't be there. Ethan stood beside her, coat collar turned up against the wind. His expression was set, unreadable. They hadn't said much on the drive, only what needed to be said. This is where it happened, she asked quietly. He nodded. That's the theater. They boarded it up after the collapse. No one's touched it since. The building loomed over them, black windows like empty eyes. A single street lamp flickered nearby, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Amelia's breath clouded in the cold. And you think whoever's been following us will be here? I don't know, he said. But every message, every photo, it's been leading here. He reached for her hand. You don't have to come in. Her heart was thudding, but she tightened her fingers around his. Yes, I do. The front door gave way with a groan, the hinges protesting years of silence. Inside, the air was thick with dust and damp. Their footsteps echoed across cracked tiles and old posters that still clung to the walls. A collapsed scaffolding tower leaned drunkenly against a far wall, twisted metal and forgotten debris. Ethan stopped, his jaw tightening. That's where it happened. Amelia looked at him, her chest tightening. He was staring at the wreckage with the haunted expression of someone watching their past replay itself. You didn't cause this, she whispered. You couldn't have. He didn't answer. They moved deeper into the building, using the flashlight from his phone to cut through the dark. Every sound, dripping water, the creak of floorboards, made her flinch. And then she saw it. A shape. At the end of the corridor. Ethan, she breathed. He turned the light, the beam catching movement. Someone ducked behind a pillar. Wait! Ethan shouted, breaking into a run. Amelia's heart jumped as she followed, her boots echoing on the cracked floor. They turned a corner, but the space was empty. Only an open door, leading to the stage. They stepped through. The old theater yawned around them, seats draped in cobwebs, stage lights hanging like dead stars. And in the center of the stage, a single chair. On it, an envelope. Ethan approached slowly. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Inside was another photograph. It showed him years ago, standing at this very spot. And behind him, in the shadows, Daniel. Scrawled beneath in black ink. Some debts never stay buried. Amelia's blood ran cold. Ethan. But before she could finish, a sound cut through the air, the unmistakable click of a camera shutter. They spun around. The light from the stage door flickered, and there, standing just beyond it, was the figure. Tall. Still. Watching. Daniel? Ethan's voice cracked on the name. The man didn't answer. But in the dim light, Amelia could see his face, pale, lined, and unmistakably real. Alive. For a second, time seemed to collapse. 2 years, 2 lives, everything that had been lost. Ethan took a step forward. You're alive. The man's expression didn't change. You left me, he said, his voice low, hoarse. You walked away and let me rot in the dark. Ethan shook his head. I didn't know. They told me you were dead. Daniel snapped. You believed what you wanted to believe. Amelia felt Ethan flinch beside her, the guilt written across his face. She stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. If you wanted revenge, why come after me? Daniel's eyes flicked toward her, and for the first time, his expression shifted, something like regret. Because he finally cared about someone again, he said. And I needed him to feel what I felt. Silence fell. The kind that hurt to breathe in. Then Ethan said quietly, I didn't abandon you, Daniel. I came back that night, after the fall. You were gone. Daniel's jaw clenched. And now you get to play the good man. Ethan took another step forward. No. Just a man who's tired of running. He stopped within arm's reach. If you want to hurt me, do it. But leave her out of it. Amelia's heart caught not from fear, but from the way he said it. Without hesitation. Daniel looked between them, 2 people standing together in the ruins of everything he'd lost. His anger cracked, if only for a heartbeat. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared through the side door, leaving behind only silence and the smell of dust. Ethan exhaled shakily, dropping to his knees. He's alive, he whispered. After all this time. Amelia knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Then maybe now you can stop running. He looked up at her, eyes tired, but softer. Not without you. The rain began again, pattering through the broken roof, washing the dust from the old stage floor. And in that fragile moment, surrounded by ghosts and echoes, they held each other as if the world outside no longer existed. For the first time, the shadows didn't feel so dark. The next morning, the rain hadn't stopped. London was wrapped in a cold, endless drizzle, the kind that blurred lights and made the city seem like it was weeping. Amelia stood by the window of Ethan's flat, watching people hurry by below, umbrellas like moving shadows. Neither she nor Ethan had spoken much since Shoreditch. He hadn't slept, she could see it in the way his hands trembled as he poured coffee, the dark circles under his eyes. He kept staring at his phone, waiting for a message that wouldn't come. Finally, Amelia said softly, You know he's not gone. Ethan looked up, weary but resolute. I know. And he won't stop until it ends. She crossed the room and took his hand. Then let's end it together. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he nodded, a quiet, broken sort of nod that meant yes. They found the note slipped under his door later that afternoon. It was damp, the ink bleeding slightly from the rain. One last truth. Midnight. Battersea Bridge. Amelia's pulse quickened as she read it. Ethan's eyes darkened. He's bringing us back to where it all began. She frowned. What happened there? He hesitated, then said quietly, That's where I was supposed to meet him, the night of the accident. The guilt in his voice was thick, heavy. He waited for me, Ethan continued. And when I didn't show, he wanted the sight alone. Amelia's heart broke a little at that, not just for Daniel, but for Ethan, who had been carrying the weight of that night for years. By the time they reached Battersea, the rain had turned to mist. The bridge stretched out before them, slick and gleaming under the streetlights. The Thames below was black and restless. Ethan's breath clouded in the cold. He'll come. Amelia's fingers brushed his. And if he doesn't? He gave a tired smile. Then maybe that's its own answer. But then a sound. Footsteps. From the far end of the bridge, Daniel appeared, the same coat, the same unreadable expression. His presence was like a shadow come to life. "Right on time," Daniel said, his voice calm, too calm. Ethan took a step forward. "We don't have to do this." Daniel's lips twitched. "No, you do. Because you never said the one thing that mattered." Ethan frowned. "What?" "That you were sorry." The words hit the air like a blade. For a long moment, only the river spoke, whispering below them. Then Ethan said, quietly but firmly, "I am." Daniel blinked, as if he hadn't expected that. "You're lying." "No," Ethan's voice cracked. "I should have been there. I should have stayed. I told myself I couldn't face it, but I was just a coward. And I've lived with that every day since." The rain began again, a soft, relentless rhythm against the bridge. Amelia stood silently, watching the two men who had once been brothers face each other through the wreckage of time. Daniel's expression wavered, anger, grief, disbelief, all flickering in his eyes. "You can't just wash it away with sorry." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not trying to. I just don't want to lose any more of what's left." He reached into his coat, slowly, and pulled out a photograph. It was the three of them, smiling outside that same theater years ago. "You were my family, Daniel. You still are." Something in Daniel broke then. His face crumpled, and for the first time, the hardness in his voice faltered. "I wanted you to hurt. I wanted you to see what it's like to lose everything." Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "I already did." The silence that followed was heavy and fragile. Daniel turned away, gripping the railing, the wind tugging at his coat. When he finally spoke, his voice was trembling. "I don't know how to forgive you." Ethan stepped beside him. "Then just stop hating me. Start there." For a moment, they stood side by side, two silhouettes against the London night, two men bound by pain and memory. Amelia watched, her heart tight, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. Then Daniel looked at her, really looked. "You love him," he said quietly. She nodded. "Yes." He smiled faintly, a sad, tired smile. "Then take care of him." Before either of them could move, he stepped back into the mist and was gone. No sound. No scream. Only the endless rush of the river. "Daniel!" Ethan shouted, leaning over the rail. But there was nothing, no trace, but the rippling black water below. He dropped to his knees, shaking. Amelia pulled him close, her tears mixing with the rain. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over now." But deep down, she wasn't sure. Because as they stood there, the city lights flickered, and from somewhere beyond the fog, a camera shutter clicked again. 3 weeks had passed since that night on Battersea Bridge. London had shifted seasons again, the chill easing, soft sunlight seeping back into the city like forgiveness. But for Ethan, time still felt heavy. He woke each morning to silence, half expecting the sound of a camera shutter, half dreading it. Amelia stayed with him, quietly piecing his world back together, one gentle word, one cup of tea, one moment of stillness at a time. Yet the ghost of Daniel lingered. Sometimes Ethan thought he saw him, a figure in a reflection, a shadow at the end of the street. But each time he blinked, it vanished, leaving only memory. One evening, Amelia found him on the balcony, watching the city lights. "You're thinking about him again," she said softly. He didn't deny it. "I keep wondering if he's really gone." She leaned beside him, arms folded against the chill. "Maybe he didn't want you to know. Maybe this was his way of setting you free." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something like peace in his eyes. "You sound like you believe that." "I have to," she whispered. "Otherwise all of this meant nothing." Ethan reached for her hand. It meant everything. Later that night, as Amelia lay awake, she heard him moving around the flat. Papers rustling. Drawers opening. When she found him, he was in the studio, the old one he hadn't entered since the accident. The air smelled of dust and paint thinner. He stood before a blank canvas, brush trembling in his hand. "I used to think painting was a way to escape," he said quietly. "Now I think it's a way to remember." Amelia stepped closer. "Then remember." He looked at her, then dipped the brush into color. The first stroke was hesitant, then stronger, bolder. Hours passed, blue bleeding into gray, light brushing against shadow. By morning, the canvas was no longer blank. It showed 3 figures standing beneath the theater's broken sign, 2 facing the light, 1 fading into it. Amelia's throat tightened. "It's beautiful." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's goodbye." Days turned into weeks. Life, as it always does, began to move again. Amelia returned to her design studio, the hum of the city settling around her like an old rhythm. Ethan started a small exhibition, The Last Light, paintings that told their story without a single word. People came. They lingered. They felt something they couldn't quite name. And one evening, after the gallery had closed, Amelia found him standing before that same painting again, the one from the theater. "I think he'd have liked this," she said. Ethan nodded. "Maybe this was what he wanted all along, for me to stop hiding." Amelia slipped her arm around his waist. "And for you to start living." He turned to her, the city's golden light flickering through the window, catching the tears in her eyes. "I already did," he murmured. "The moment you found me." Outside, the first stars began to appear, faint, uncertain, but they're all the same. They stood together, framed by that quiet glow, the city still and vast beneath them. And somewhere in the distance, maybe real, maybe memory, a shutter clicked one last time. But this time, it wasn't a threat. It was peace. Sparkle's the end, but not really. Because love, even when tested by shadows and loss, doesn't end. It changes, transforms, and lingers like light that refuses to fade.